Welcome back, class. We're gonna talk about the role of a leader in change, and kind of forewarn you before we go through this. Um, Again, I talk about it. I'm somewhat of an academic, so it's easy for me to make uh, kind of snide remarks about other academics, but um, they're the academics or the individuals that wrote the text. I think overall they've done a pretty good, actually better than average job on presenting the material and making it easy to understand. But every once in a while they kind of get into this academic mode, and um, some of the gyrations you go through in some of these texts. And it's not just this text; it's every leadership text I've ever read. They talk about they like to, I guess, use terminology to describe processes or procedures or approaches that we've all heard about. The majority of us think they're common sense, but again, they've got to have something to sell, textbooks. And again, I actually enjoy reading this text, especially some sections a lot better than others. But um, it's not a it's a way above average text, at least compared to the leadership text I've read. But we'll kind of get into it as we move forward. Um, the role of leader in change, it's most radical change involves procedure. Most radical change involves proactive and discontinuous change in an organization. Change is transformative, transformative. So you're trying, change is how do you transform uh, the firm? Is as a leader, you've got, and it doesn't necessarily mean a new leader to a firm, but as a leader in a firm, you have a mission and you have a vision, you have a culture you would like to implement. That you've got some new norms and metrics and beliefs and values that you'd like to implement on your culture. And as you start putting all that together, uh, you all of a sudden think, well, I'm not sure it's going to, you don't want to be, square peg in a round hole. And so at that point, and you see some change on the horizon in the environment that you're working in, and you're trying to make everything work as a leader. And at that point, you're going to be trying to transform the organization that you're working for, so it performs better and maintains, whether, let's say, it doesn't have a competitive advantage. You want to develop that competitive advantage, or if it does have one, you want to maintain it going forward. Uh, Managers are most often responsible for the incremental reactive change. So leaders are more on the proactive, uh, discontinuous, of the two by two that they talk about in the text. Um, Managers, and kind of when they talk about managers, talk about middle managers, uh, are more in the incremental reactive change areas. And maybe it was chapter 1 or 2 we talked about the difference between leadership and management, or leadership and managers. uh, Managers are more viewed in the kind of the day-to-day operations, the process effectiveness, that kind of thing. Leaders are more focused on strategy and developing, again, culture and mission and vision. So the text kind of breaks it out. Depending on whether you're a leader or you're kind of a manager, you're going to be kind of looking at some combinations, because on that little 2 by 2 they gave you, um, that's what they're talking about. Um, they had, I can't remember how it was set up, but it was like um, proactive and reactive, maybe down the vertical and up at the horizontal. It was, what, continuous and discontinuous, or incremental and discontinuous. Yeah, I can't remember exactly how it was set up, but on those little 2 by 2s like that, you're picking combinations. And if you're kind of middle manager, you're going to be kind of a combination that's reactive and incremental change. If you're on the leader, kind of more in the leader role in an organization, you're going to be more in the proactive and discontinuous type change. Leaders are more often responsible for for the transformation and discontinuous change because it's riskier, requires more input and acceptance from leaders. So leaders are taking the responsibility. Again, we talked in some of the earlier chapters about responsibility and accepting accountability. And in the leader, that's one of those. And if you don't believe me, you get into a leadership role, and if you have some rogue followers or maybe some rogue middle managers that reporting to you and they go off the deep end somewhere along the way, the senior management team is going to look at you and say that was your team, you're responsible, you're accountable for them. And it's kind of like, to remember that, you need to go to the Bureau of Printing and Engraving in DC and get you one of those little plaques that says the buck stops here, because the buck does stop here if you're a leader. When they talk about transformational kind of leader, changes, they throw out IBM versus Kodak and Polaroid as examples of companies that, one changes and move forward and the other one goes by the wayside. And again, it's just this transformational change. Think back to the comment I made earlier in this chapter when did I say that the average lifespan of a firm that shows up on the S&P 500 is only 12 years. Either they go out of business or they get, merged with or, acquired by, some other, kind of like Pac-Man. You've got all of these, companies out there acquiring and then merging. So 12 years seems like an eternity, but, it's not that long in the lifespan of a company. They talk about one person can't be responsible for success or failure of an entire change process in a large firm. If you're in a large firm, think about Netflix or IBM or 3M or Procter and Gamble or some of those larger firms. You've got to have a level of kind of, if you're the leader at the very top of the food chain, you've got to have some middle managers and some followers that are buying into it and helping you move this process along. Leaders have to be the visionary change leaders to move transformational leadership forward or transformational change forward. And then here's where they start into some of the academic work, and they've got some verbiage here that it makes sense what they're talking about. Maybe if I was writing the book or if you were writing the book, you might use some different verbiage. But again, they're trying to put their own take on the first one. In the first one, they talk about a 3-stage approach to generating organizational change. They say change represents a process that unfolds over time, and that is true. Change is not an overnight thing. And again, it depends on the magnitude of the change. It can take several months, could even take several years to implement the entire change. But it depends on whether you're looking at proactive or reactive change or incremental or discontinuous. It's those, depending on which of that 2 by 2 you fall in, it's going to give you a different timeline on change. And the first step, they say unfreeze. Leaders provide compelling reasons for why change is necessary. And they're trying to provide the followers with the rationale for change. If it's reactive change, again, we talked about, that's pretty easy. There's declining sales, declining revenues, products, customers leaving. If it's reactive, it's pretty easy to do. If it's proactive, it's more difficult to do because maybe the firm's been, since we talked about, maybe the firm's been successful, and you trying to get people to change, and the risk that they perceive to be involved, it can take a while. Leader provides information driving the change. There's going to be storm clouds or potential future opportunities. So you either pitch it as storm clouds, so you're talking about reactive change, so you're pitching the storm clouds, or you're talking about on proactive change, you're talking about here's the future, here's the potential opportunities. If we make these changes to our operational processes, think what we will, what position, how we can position ourselves in the future and be able to take advantage of these opportunities. And then they provide you a little quote in the text that say, people change because they either see the light or because they feel the fire. And that is, I think that is a very appropriate comment. I can't remember who they attributed it to in the text, but I think that is a very appropriate comment when they're talking about change. So now, now we've unfrozen, we're going through the unfreeze process, and we're providing some rationale. Then we go through the change step. Leaders provide a reasonable plan for dealing with the change. Transition. So when you're going through change, if any of you have ever been through change, or if you haven't, you will be thrust into this at some point if you're trying to climb that leadership ladder. You assign a transition manager. They're the one that's responsible for implementing the change. Then there's a transition team, and you lay out the necessary resources. There's some feedback metrics that you're going to monitor to make sure change is happening and kind of following the timeline. And again, you set forth a clear time frame for the implementation. And you've seen these schematics. Excel has a function that you can lay out your schematics, and you put timelines in, and you can manage it, and you can put your a lot of them I've seen have had stoplights on it, red, yellow, green on the stoplights, and you can put that in your document and make just a really snazzy looking document. But at the end of the day, if you don't implement the change in a timely fashion, the little snazzy document, doesn't do you a lot of good. Leader builds support with key power groups. And then, they try to preempt any resistance. And trust me, there's going to be resistance. I don't care, even if it's a reactive change and their pants were on fire, there's going to be resistance. I have never in my career tried to implement change that there wasn't some level of resistance. Change efforts should not be all top down. You can't push it from the top down. You've got to have middle management on board. You've got to have some level of your followers on board to try to drag everybody forward to the finish line. And then the third step is your refreeze. Freeze, change, refreeze. Pretty snappy. Ensure no backsliding once change is implemented. New behaviors and processes are firmly embedded in the organization's culture. So once you've got the change up and running and implemented, you want to make sure it's embedded in the culture, or there will be some backsliding. New metrics, realignment of incentives and rewards, sanctions for any old behavior and habits. And you're going to have some sanctions in place. You're going to have to ding some people, because you're going to have some individuals that are they're going to be so reluctant to change that they never come on board. You continue communication of the new vision, and you've got to constantly continue that communication of the new vision. And at some point, and I've unfortunately had to deal with it in the past, you're going to have some individuals that just never come on board. And those individuals need either to find a place within the company that they had rather work, or maybe it's time for them to leave the company and find greener pasture somewhere else. And then now we're gonna go through this Kotter's 8-step model of plan change. And as we go through this Kotter's 8-step model, it just and even the text talk about it. It may be a new model and it may be a new twist and everything, but it's just elaborating and going a little more detail on the 3-step model that has been around forever. First step is to create a sense of urgency. Why, when, what's in it for me? And that's one of the questions you're going to have to continually answer to your followers, because they're going to ask, what's in it for me? And if you can't explain the benefits that this change is going to ensure that roll downhill to them, it's going to be extremely difficult to get them on board. The important need to change and the employee commitment to make something happen. You've got to have that on board. Reactive, driven by threats, proactive, opportunity that can be captured. Again, I've always been more interested in the proactive because I'm always been concerned about what future opportunities can we capture. Plus, I never like to be in the reactive mode because if I'm in the reactive mode, I've missed the boat. I went to sleep at the wheel somewhere along the way and didn't see change coming and didn't see the benefit of jumping or being one of the first in an organization or one of the first to lead a firm into that initial steps of the change. Overall message should be positive, but initial message may have to be negative. In other words, you got to get their attention. Even on a proactive change, you may have to throw out some negative, I hate to say threats, but some negative bullet points on that PowerPoint slide because you've got to convince them that if we don't capture this future opportunity, we're going to be left behind when all the other competing firms do. The second step is form a powerful coalition. Organizations are often resistant to change. You need to identify the key people that are going to support your change. So what's important in this second step is you got to do two things. You've got to identify the key people. You've got to identify those nervous Nellies that are going to resist your change. And the coalition that you form, it can provide initial energy and it can overcome those who might be resistant to change. You need to identify the powerful individuals that might thwart change and persuade or at least potentially fix the individuals that are going to give you the pushback on change. Go back to, and again, I'll lose track of the chapters, but we were talking about in some of the earlier chapters that leaders need to be talking about in a social environment. You had some leaders, the successful leaders can pick out those that are going to be welcomed into the coalition, are going to help them move things forward, and those that are going to be resistors and always going to be trouble. And a successful leader, especially in a social setting, needs to be able to work the crowd and the network and to be able to identify these individuals before you get to that point where you're trying to implement change. Third step, create a vision for change. Nowhere's a leader's vision more important than when affecting change, and that's true. You've got to have a vision and you've got to be able to have a compelling argument for that vision, and especially the vision of why change is going to be important. Provide an emotionally compelling argument for change. I'm not sure I'm what I would ever consider an emotional leader, but I can do a pretty good job providing a compelling argument. Simple vision that implies an emotional reaction or inspires an emotional reaction. The simpler, in some of these change situations, the simpler the vision and the simpler the rationale for change is actually better. You don't want to get too involved. You like, goes back to the sign I had that hung on my desk. Keep it simple, stupid. KISS, KISS. Keep it simple. What you're trying to affect with the change and how it benefits them. You've constantly got to be communicating that to the followers or to others in the organization. Here's why we're making the change, and here's how it's going to benefit you. It may be job security. It may be opening into a new market and opportunities for relocation. It may be opening up an office overseas and somewhere outside the contiguous 48, and you pitch it, that's going to be opportunities for some of you to experience what it's like to work overseas. 4, communicate and role model a vision widely. Communicate the vision and reason for the change frequently and powerfully. Again, communication. If you notice, communication is a common theme that runs through all of these steps. Illustrate, communicate with stories, examples. Um, Use multiple forms of media. The more forms of media you choose and to utilize, it may drive the point home to some of these individuals that are going to be your resistors along the way. Key leaders need to communicate the message to all employees. Again, don't use a surrogate. Get out there as a leader. You step up. It's your vision. It's your idea for change. Get up and communicate that to your followers. Leaders or their surrogates must behave consistently with the vision. Again, I don't believe in surrogates. I believe if a leaders want to implement change, they have to, where they have walk the talk, they have to be able to communicate that change, and they have to lead the teams and not depend on surrogates. And again, walk the talk, all the change that they want to see. Step number 5, remove obstacles. And this is one that seems to get lost somewhere along the shuffle. When you're removing obstacles, you want to identify obstacles to change so employees are empowered to act. May have to change structure. You may have to change the HR process. Definitely going to have to change some metrics to be able to monitor the change process as you're moving along. Eliminate bureaucratic procedures that reinforce status quo. Bureaucrats inhibit change, and that is if they don't make any other statements when they're talking about change, that is definitely a true statement. You've got individuals that have been there their entire life, maybe, and they are going to be so resistant to change, it is going to be extremely difficult to ever get them on board. New reporting relationships may be required, signaling the importance of the change. When I worked at United, infrastructure, reporting, guideline, reporting lines of reporting change constantly. Number 6, create short-term wins. Need to ensure that the effort is serious and can be successful. It's a powerful way to signal that you're moving things forward by highlighting these short-term wins. Look for initial short-term win. However, find easy wins are achieved without the help of critics or with little investment. It's really neat when you're pushing a change forward if you can highlight the fact that change is moving forward even because of obstacles in the way. You've been able to, as a leader, to circumvent those obstacles, to either move around them, either up, over, through, around them, to implement your change, and it will bring more and more followers on board if you can show these short-term wins or short-time wins, especially initial ones in that first couple of weeks or something, and prove that you've been able to accomplish them even with all the obstacles in the way. Build on the change. And they make a comment in here, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and that is true. Major change efforts are more like a marathon race. Short-term wins don't guarantee long-term success. Absolutely, they don't. You've got to have some initial short-term wins, but you've got to keep those wins coming as you move across that timeline. Don't declare, and whatever you do, don't declare victory too soon. I've been in organizations where we're going through change, and a leader of a functional area will be talking about all the change they've been doing, and I can remember being at a health plan, and they were talking about a claims payment system. Oh, it was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it was going to improve the probability of all healthcare claims paying accurately the first time through the system. And they were talking about victory, and they couldn't wait to implement it. And when they flipped the switch to turn that claims adjudication system on, it was like smoke came out of that claims. I mean, it was the biggest fiasco I've ever been involved in. And it was, and then some characters in the organization started wearing T-shirts that said, let's see. How can I soar like an eagle when I'm surrounded by a bunch of turkeys or something? I don't know. I mean, it was such a fiasco that it was actually funny. It was such a fiasco. But again, jumped in, guaranteed success. Yes, we're victorious. They hit the switch and it just uh, it was a mess. Uh, Major goals, timelines tracked via metrics. And again, I'm an economist. I love metrics. Information and metrics are going to drive the success of your change operation. Uh, you can't have too many metrics, but you've got to ensure that the metrics are relative to the change process, and you've got to have the information that's going to be able to accurately calculate the metrics going forward, or your followers are going to you're going to lose followers along the way. And then 8, anchor the changes in organizational structure. What do we talk about? Step number 3, and then the 3-step process. New ways of behavior should be embedded in the organization's culture. Creation of new positions sends a clear signal. And you will have organizations that will create a lot of new positions once this organizational change goes into effect. Changes in rewards, promotions are critical in aligning change within the organization's culture. Inconsistent reward systems will be glaring and be, I guess, demotivating. I've never thought about demotivating. I have a lot of upset followers, definitely upset followers, and you'll have those individuals that'll keep saying, "Oh, I remember the old way," or and they're constantly comparing the old and the new. And when you're talking about this step 8, you better have HR on board, because HR is going to be a significant driver, and especially the reward system. And the authors go through and they say, okay, let's compare the 3-step with the 8-step. And the unfreeze, the 1st step and the 3-step, it's like steps 1 through 3 in the 8-step. You've got change is like steps 4 through 6 in Kotter's model. And then you've got the refreeze, it's like steps 7 and 8 in Kotter's model. And in both models, depending on which one you like the best or which one you think would work best for you, it's driving towards change leaders. It's trying to develop a process or a strategy for change leaders to implement change. And change leaders try to do 2 things: help those affected by the change, why it's necessary, and why it's important to help them. And it is extremely important to continue to communicate. Systematic plan and comprehensive strategy for implementation. Those are the 2 things important. If you're going to be a change leader, you've got to have those going for you. And with that, we're going to stop with this segment 2. When we come back, we're going to talk about for a few minutes, probably not very long, but just talking about how you deal with resistance to change. And trust me, there's going to be resistance to any change process.